All right, everybody, welcome to another special edition of Corona Geek. We're doing developer conversations, and joining me today is Declan McCullagh, CEO of Recent Media and also developer of Recent News, a smart news app powered by artificial intelligence. Which Declan, thanks for being here. Number one, and number two, I definitely want to get to this artificial intelligence piece because that just sounds like fun.
Well, thanks for having me on. I've watched these shows before, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I tell you what I want to start out with is a few things. Well, first of all, I want to hit a bunch of things, and we're going to do that in a short amount of time. And I want to kind of get a backstory from you, your own personal background, how recent news came about, and also then hit some of the high points of some of the technical bits I'm sure people have questions about. Maybe talk about monetization, maybe get into marketing if we have a chance. Before we get into that, though, I tell you what, I have to say, you have one impressive bio, and I think it's worth mentioning. But would you give us your background a little bit, because I think it has a lot to do with this idea of having a news reader.
I studied cognitive science, computer science in school, and was prepared to take a programming job, but Wired magazine was hiring. This was in the 90s, and they said, we want you to move to Washington and start covering technology stuff for us. And so I did. I then went to Time. I went back a few years later to be Wired's bureau chief, and then I spent some time at CNET, then at CBS, and out here in San Francisco as well. But all that time, I had these sort of technological side projects going on. I created a news search engine called Rocketbot back before Google's news launch wasn't nearly as good. But I've been always interested in creating a better way to find news online. And so that's what led me and my co-founder to create Recent News, which is iOS, Android. We built with Corona. It's pure Corona. We didn't use Enterprise, for instance, and we launched it a few months ago, and it's been a lot of fun and painful at times, but a lot of fun to create. But we looked at a bunch of other development environments, and including Xamarin. We tried a JavaScript framework, actually a framework layered on top of JavaScript, and we eventually, and we also started doing some iOS-only development. For instance, some of the angel investors in the Bay Area said, "Do one only and do it well." And I think if we had done that, and these are very smart, very successful people giving us this advice years ago, it would have been a mistake, because it turns out that the majority of our users are actually Android, not iOS, which I would not have expected years ago. And so we're glad we went this approach, although it did require a lot of reinvention of UI components that you get kind of for free in the native world.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I did notice on the website that you have the Android store button, and then you have the iOS button, and I thought that was interesting. I wanted to ask you, was that on purpose, or is it just that your audience is skewed to one or the other?
I'd have to get the latest stats, but as of last month, it's probably it was probably close to 65-70% Android, which is again not what I would have expected. I thought this is something that would split down the middle, especially because iOS is more US dominant.
Okay.
But I'm glad we could do both.
So give me the backstory then of Recent News. How did it come about? I mean, you have this background in sort of in journalism and in programming and on all these things, and you said you were working at CBS. So how did this thing come about, and where is it headed?
Well, it came about as almost as an experiment. Can we actually create a personalized news? I mean, the idea of it, just the one paragraph summary, would be a very simple 1 minute, 2 minute news summaries. There are potentially tens of thousands of stories out there a day. who wants to wade through these? Even aggregators like the Drudge Report on one side of the spectrum or the Huffington Post on the other aren't exactly personalized. You may not care about the Nevada caucuses. So we wanted to create an intelligent app, something that you could just use very quickly and give you stuff that's relevant to you. And the first application is news, but there's no reason you can't expand it later to say something like, well, there's a new product out. You're interested in this product. Hey, here's a link if you'd like to buy it. But we split things up this way. The back end is in Python and Google App Engine. And especially a year or two ago, App Engine was a little more buggy, but it's mature. It actually so has Corona in that time. And we're delighted to use App Engine because even though there's additional upfront cost, it's very scalable. Snapchat uses it, for instance. And there's also a network of fetchers that are based in at Linode. I think they're all in the Newark facility, and those are the ones that actually go out and scour news sites for new articles. They do some initial processing, they do some initial image analysis, but the back end is where the intelligence is. So no offense to Corona, but it's actually kind of a dumb app. It's saying here's a user ID. Here, give us the stuff for the user, and then the back end returns it in a JSON format through its standard REST API. And that's how it works. So the app actually doesn't have to be that smart, but there are edge cases. I mean, it has to store stuff locally if the network connection is down. It has to it caches a lot to improve performance. But the real brains of it, I have to say on the back. Like when you do something in the app, you read an article, you bookmark an article, you share an article, you click the little read more on the web or continue reading button. Those actions are sent to the server so it can update your user profile accordingly and say, oh, well, maybe you really like this article about Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton. Let's adjust the magic accordingly. It can be used anonymously. If you want to link accounts, the easiest way is with Facebook, but if you don't ever want to do that, then you can use it anonymously. We don't have to know your email address, or you can use it without us knowing where you are. Local news won't work, but everything else will.
You said you used Python. Was there any reason why you didn't use Go? Or was it just not mature enough at the time, or not available?
It wasn't mature enough at the time. I and my co-founder don't have a whole lot of experience in it, and so even if it were mature, but back then it was Google App Engine was not as frankly as stable as it is now. And the Go support was much more in prototype phase. I wouldn't use it at the time for production, and so there are lots of very good natural language processing libraries, things like that, available for Python. So Python was the obvious choice, and that's what we also use on the fetchers at Linode to do the web crawling and the initial intake of articles.
Now, I noticed that one of the things, again, on the website, it talks about this fact that it understands, it reads the news and understands it, I think is one of the phrases on the website. And what kind of challenge is involved with that? I know that's not specifically Corona related, but I'm sure people are curious as to how this back-end system, understands the news and is able to present that to people.
Wow, that could be an entire hour conversation right there. But it's kind of simple. The crawler knows how frequently, or I should say that the backend knows how frequently news organizations are updated. The different ones at different update frequencies. The Associated Press might publish something every few minutes, and you might have literary magazines that only publish something every week. And so based on an approximation of that frequency, you can tell the fetchers like, hey, check out this site to see if there's anything interesting and new, or just new. And then if there is something new, the fetchers will download the article, do some initial processing, do some initial image processing, do some rudimentary natural language processing, and then the back end of Google App Engine will do the rest of the stuff, really the magic, which is clustering articles together. If you have a bunch of articles about, say, the FBI and Apple, those will be grouped together for ease of reading. It'll do things like figuring out whether this cluster of articles or this individual article is relevant to you and should be added to your something you tagged as something you might be interested in. It also would update profiles. I mean, maybe you've been reading a lot of articles about NASCAR, and so then we'll suggest NASCAR as a topic, even if you haven't explicitly followed it. We'll sort of implicitly surface it as something you might like. So the real magic happens in the back end.
Well, I tell you, one of the questions that came from the community when they knew that we were going to talk was this idea of lazy loading. So I would imagine, I'm imagining this server on the back end. It's going and doing these fetches, crawling things, and pulling in the news articles, but it's also pulling in images. Because in the app, there are various layouts that I can have. I can have big images or small thumbnail images or no images at all. Talk a little bit about the lazy loading piece that happens on the client. What's entailed there?
It's a good question. There are really two halves of it. The first is doing lazy loading in Corona when Corona doesn't have native support, or I should say out-of-the-box support for things like being able to swipe left and swipe right. And it has table views and scroll views, but we had to build something we called a tab view on top of that. And we initially tried to use just a scroll view with added intelligence built in, but no, we had to kind of just do the entire framework ourselves, and then to support left and right swiping. We use it all over the place. We use it in the intro screen when you're the embarkment screen when you first sign up. We use it on the home screen. We use it when you're searching for topics. It's the tab view, what we call the tab view module we created is kind of the basic module that everything in the app uses. And part of that that has the lazy loading of images built in. From a backend perspective, it's not really that as interesting to Corona developers, but we had to do our own CDN because news organizations they can be cheap bastards sometimes. I was speaking as a former employee when I know this, and they have really slow image servers, and so we're using one just as a temporary caching proxy, and then we can do the image resizing on the fly. And we probably have about 4 layers of caching in our CDN.
And that sounds like it makes sense because ultimately at the end of the day, their product is you're creating a custom experience for your users, and so you can't necessarily be relying on their systems. So that makes a lot of sense.
Some news organizations are great, but some aren't, and so we in the end we serve the image from their servers for copyright reasons, of course. But we do try to add some caching, just temporary caching along the line to make it fast.
Okay, interesting. Okay, and that's a good point. I like that you mentioned that because that could be a sticky wicket, right? Getting around all the copyright issues and things like that. Because I was kind of curious about that as well. How is it you can aggregate all these pieces together and not be stepping on somebody else's copyright?
Well, I mean, I'm married to a lawyer who works out here in Silicon Valley. I have to take copyright seriously. So that's why we only display fair use excerpts of the articles, for instance. We don't display the entire text. We want to partner with news organizations. We send people, without news organizations, we don't have an app. And so we send people to news organizations. That's what happens when you get click the continue reading button. And we load the article with all of the ads in a browser or in a Safari view. And thank you, Corona, for adding that last fall. So we send people to news organizations. But we send people to high quality news.
Okay, so that you just touched on a question. Then another community question was are you using a custom browser or a normal web view? And you said something about using the Safari. So talk about that a little bit.
Well, on iOS, we were, if I recall, we were using until last September. The default was a web view. And then in September, Corona added, after I was bugging you folks for quite a while, support for the Safari View Controller. And so we added that as a default, I think. But it can be turned off, and you can still use the old web view code if you prefer. And there's also an option, if you go to the top right of the screen, the article screen, there's a pull-down menu, and then you can select Open in the browser, and that'll open it in Safari. And on Android, we are opening in the browser by default because that's what Android users told me repeatedly. They're kind of pounding me over the head when I was trying to use the web view by default. And they said, no, we want our cookies, we want our bookmarks, we want everything to work the way we want. So you give it to your users and say this is the default. There is an option to use web view on Android as well.
So are the bookmarks in recent news connected to the bookmarks on iOS, or is that something else that you maintain internally?
Oh, it's something else we maintain internally. We also maintain the user timeline, which is what they've read. We were the list of what they've shared and lists of and the bookmarks. And you can because we believe in, we're again trying to do right by our users, and privacy, and also allowing them to escape. If they decide they don't want to use our app anymore, that's fine. We're not going to try to lock you in here forever like some other competitors might. You can just go to preferences, about 5 clicks. Go to preferences, turn on export, and then go to your bookmarks, go to your history, and then with one more tap, you can export your entire timeline, explore all your bookmarks with URLs and article titles and dates and things like that. So you can it'll be on your clipboard or pasteboard.
Okay, well, you just touched on menus. This is going great. You just touched on menus, and that was one of the other comments that and one of the things that are just really obvious right from the beginning when you start using the app. Talk about menus. How are they implemented? Did you have any problems in implementing them?
We have about a dozen modules. I already mentioned the tab view one. We also have one for called Newsbox that handles kind of the different layouts, whether it's magazine layout or newspaper layout. There's one for pull-down menus. There's one for radio buttons, the intro buttons on the first screen, the left menu or pull-out menu, the app bar menu. This is at the top, buttons, checkboxes for the side glow effect that native Android apps have. If you overscroll to the left, we use that for iOS, and so we had to add. Let me back up a little. About a year and a half ago, we were testing an early version, really an alpha version of the app, and the backend was working really well. It's really best in class recommendations, but the app looked really horrible. And then soon afterwards, a few weeks after, we were alpha testing. Google announced Material Design, which is the unifying design language. Design geeks really care a lot about this, and so we said, Google's apps are the best on iOS, and they're obviously standard on Android. So I think a lot of people are going to be used to this design language, and it's going to simplify if we our own internal processes, if we just standardize on one. So let's standardize the Material Design for iOS and Android. We did that, and I thought users would kind of complain, like, well, this doesn't feel like an iOS app. You have side glows, and you have floating action buttons, and you have app bar menus, and you're using all the Android icon set and the Roboto font. And well, kind of one user who's a personal friend actually complained and said, I didn't really understand this X at the top. It should be a back arrow. But that was it. iOS users are happy to use Material Design, and people, or maybe people just don't care as much about design as app developers think, in terms of whether it's exactly native feeling or
not. So everything that you're saying, that most everything there, that flyout menus and submenus and things like that, those are all custom modules that you built.
We did, and it was that was in terms of building the app. That was the most time-consuming process. More that, and maybe the lazy loading of images to do it gracefully, and to try to scale down on the performance on slower devices and try to guess how fast or slow a device is based on a number of factors. It was really those two things that were the slowest for development time. Other things like storing the user account, sending stuff back to the server for authentication, that was relatively simple with standard network library.
Okay. And as far as encryption goes, putting information back and forth securely, do you have any problems there?
No, we use SSL for everything. There's all connections to the backend are encrypted, and yep, no problem. Well, there actually are some edge cases, but those are Google App Engine specific. You want to use custom domain names and different SSL certs, but that's not Corona's fault.
Okay, so let's talk then a little bit about monetization. I see it's a newsreader app. I don't see any ads in it. You say that when someone goes and looks at the news organization site, they get those ads, but I'm sure those aren't attributed or any income to you. How are you? What's your monetization plan?
Monetization makes more sense when you have a large number of users. We have in the tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands or millions, at least not yet. We've been focused more on technology than marketing, and we're sort of shifting in that direction. Just because we are the technology stable, it works now. It's time to grow. Maybe a few more features. For instance, adding a dark theme, allowing some of the velocity or scrolling parameters to be tweaked. If you have a really fast device, maybe you want it to seem faster. The reason we haven't added ads yet is twofold. The first is, again, just wait for users, and also it would be one of the value propositions of this app, to use marketing speak, is that we know a lot about you, so we can just give you only really relevant ads. So we can run the ads through our own algorithm, for instance, for relevant stories. If you have BMW wants to show you an ad, we'll run it through the same relevance algorithm, and you only see it if it's actually relevant to you. So these are, and so because we haven't been able to build that out yet, and as a practical matter, advertisers don't want to advertise with very small audiences. We haven't done it yet. We might experiment with adding some of the built-in or some of the ad technologies that are currently supported by Corona, but we haven't done that yet.
So, am I understanding correctly? Did I hear correctly that you're thinking about having your own ad platform that you would then use to give custom ads to people?
Our own or a partnership. You'd have much more control with your own. Then you could say. Then you would be able to have very precise targeting of ads. But again, you need the audience before advertisers are going to be willing to talk to you.
Okay. And I saw that you guys were listed on Angel List. So is that part of just a marketing strategy, or is that part of a funding strategy, or how does that work?
It's actually neither. It's kind of just what you do if you have a startup in the San Francisco Bay Area, so then people can reach you and know what you're doing. We haven't looked for outside funding. We haven't met with venture capitalists. Right now this is self-funded, and the expenses are relatively small in terms of maintaining App Engine. It's just really our ability to not to go without a salary. But it's, at some point, our willingness or desire to fund this out of our pockets will come to an end.
Very nice. All right. Well, Declan, thank you very much for your time. Hang out after the interview here. I want to talk with you some more, but everyone listening can go to recent.io and download the app for iOS or Android. I highly recommend you do. I don't know if you've used news aggregators in the past. If you have, you've probably been disappointed at some point in your experience, and I guarantee you that you will not be disappointed with this app. It is beautifully designed. It works the way that you want it to work, and it's intuitive. So go check it out, recent.io.